There's a certain kind of person who doesn't just believe, they cling. No matter how much evidence you show, how many contradictions you point out, they won't let go. Not because they're stupid, but because belief, for them, isn't just an idea, it's survival. To question their faith feels like dying a little. It's not a debate, it's identity surgery. And that's what makes it so fascinating and terrifying. Why do people defend their beliefs even when those beliefs hurt them? Why do they protect stories that make them ashamed, guilty, or afraid? Why can't they walk away, even when the truth is right in front of them? This isn't about mocking faith. It's about understanding the machinery behind it, the psychology that turns ideas into emotional armor. Because once you understand that, you start to see why logic fails, and why faith, for some, becomes something they'll defend with their life. The unbreakable wall. They say faith can move mountains, but for some, it builds walls instead. Not just around their beliefs, but around their entire sense of self. Once a belief becomes identity, questioning it feels like tearing off your own skin. You're not just asking, is this true? You're asking, who am I if it isn't? And that's why logic rarely works. Because the brain doesn't process it as information, it processes it as threat. To a deeply faithful mind, doubt feels like danger. The same regions of the brain that react to physical pain light up when someone challenges a core belief. It's not stubbornness, it's self-defense. The body floods with cortisol, the heart races, and before you know it, they're not debating, they're protecting. That's why conversations about faith can feel like shouting through glass. Every fact you throw bounces off the wall they've built, not because it doesn't make sense, but because it hits the wrong target. You're aiming at their logic. They're defending their identity. To them, faith isn't just something they have, it's who they are. And when your entire self is built on belief, truth isn't the goal anymore. Survival is. That's why people cling to the impossible, defend the absurd, and call it holy. Because once the wall is up, it doesn't matter what's real, only what's safe. The fear behind devotion. Most people don't defend faith because of logic. They defend it because of fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of punishment, fear of what fills the silence if the story disappears. That fear runs deeper than most realize. Because faith, for billions, isn't just a belief system, it's a safety system, a structure built to make chaos feel predictable. If you remove it, everything becomes uncertain, and for the human mind, uncertainty feels like freefall. Many believers were taught, from childhood, that doubt is dangerous, that even thinking the wrong question puts your soul at risk. So, when doubt shows up, it's not curiosity, it's betrayal. Not exploration, rebellion. And that conditioning works. Because when your worldview is tied to eternal consequences, every thought becomes a moral test. One wrong step, and you're not just mistaken, you're doomed. That's how fear disguises itself as devotion. People call it faith, but often it's just anxiety with a halo on. The sermons, the rituals, the prayers, they're all ways to manage that fear, to keep the uncertainty away. But the irony is brutal. The more afraid you are to question, the more fragile your belief becomes. That's why the most defensive believers are often the most insecure. They're not protecting God. They're protecting themselves from what happens if He's not there. Fear keeps faith alive long after logic would have let it die. And that's what makes it so powerful and so dangerous. The tribe instinct. Religion doesn't just give people gods, it gives them tribes. And tribes are powerful. They offer something deeper than belief, belonging. A place where you don't have to be right, just aligned. From the outside, it looks like devotion. But inside, it's social gravity. Humans are wired to stay close to their group. It's how we survived, long before churches existed. Being cast out once meant death. So even now, centuries later, the brain still treats rejection like danger. That's why disagreement in a religious group doesn't feel like a discussion. It feels like exile. The moment you question too loudly, you're branded as lost, rebellious, or deceived. And suddenly, every friendship, every family bond, every sense of safety is at stake. When the group says, "We're right," your nervous system relaxes. Certainty feels like warmth. But the moment you whisper, "What if we're wrong?" your body tenses. your heart races. You're not fighting an argument, you're fighting your own biology. That's why defending faith becomes less about truth and more about survival. You're protecting the social bonds that hold your world together, even if those bonds are built on illusion. And the cruel twist? The more isolated a believer feels, the harder they'll cling to the tribe that's hurting them. Because belonging, even in delusion, still feels safer than honesty in solitude. It's not stupidity, it's ancient wiring, loyalty repurposed as faith. And until that wiring is understood, no amount of reason can break the spell of the tribe. The reward loop. Every defense of faith triggers a hit of certainty, and certainty feels good. It's dopamine disguised as righteousness, that quiet rush when you know you're right. That peace that comes from trusting God. It's not just belief, it's biochemistry. The human brain craves closure. It hates open questions, unfinished thoughts, loose ends. Religion gives you all the answers, neatly packaged. Life feels simple again, controlled, predictable. And that comfort is addictive. That's why arguing rarely works. You're not debating facts, you're interrupting someone's chemical comfort zone. You're pulling away the one thing that makes their world feel safe. It's like taking a drug away mid-dose. The harder you push, the tighter they cling. When believers defend their faith, they're not always protecting ideas. They're chasing the feeling that comes from defending them. That little surge of pride when they stand firm. That relief when they silence a doubt. Every sermon, every prayer, every testimony, it all reinforces the loop. And it's self-sustaining. Each act of defense releases more certainty. Each certainty deepens devotion, until the mind confuses emotional comfort for truth. That's why religious arguments feel endless. You can't reason someone out of a state that rewards their brain for staying in it. They don't need evidence, they have endorphins. The tragedy is, certainty and truth aren't the same thing. But when one feels holy and the other feels terrifying, most people will choose the feeling every time. The guilt trap. Faith-based guilt is one of psychology's oldest leashes. It doesn't need chains, it uses conscience. You're taught early that questioning is sin, that curiosity is rebellion, that thinking for yourself is pride, the same sin that supposedly got Lucifer kicked out of heaven. So when doubt appears, it doesn't just cause anxiety, it causes shame, because now you're not just wrong, you're evil. And once that seed is planted, it grows in silence. Every time you wonder if something in Scripture makes sense, a voice whispers, "Careful, God's watching." Every time you feel confused, another voice says, "You're losing your faith." So you bury it. You suppress it. You pray harder, hoping guilt will turn into peace. But guilt doesn't go away. It feeds on obedience. The more you submit, the more approval you crave. And the more approval you crave, the smaller your freedom becomes. This is how faith turns into control. Not through fear of hellfire, that's too distant, but through the daily, quiet belief that you're never enough, that God is disappointed, that you have to earn forgiveness for simply being human. So people defend their beliefs not because they're certain, but because they're terrified of being the villain in their own story. They can't let go, not because they love their religion, but because they hate what they think they'd become without it. That's the cruel brilliance of guilt. It makes obedience feel moral, and self-respect feel sinful. The authority effect. When a person has spent a lifetime trusting priests, imams, or gurus, authority becomes sacred, not respected, sacred. Their words carry divine weight. Their approval feels like moral validation. To question them isn't just disagreement, it's disobedience. And that's by design, because obedience, in religion, is often mistaken for faith, but they're not the same thing. Faith is internal, obedience is trained. And institutions know this better than anyone. From birth, most believers are surrounded by symbols of hierarchy, pulpits raised above the crowd, robes that separate clergy from ordinary people, rituals that remind you who speaks for God and who listens to God. You're conditioned to believe that wisdom flows downward, never upward. So, when a leader lies, or manipulates, or harms, the instinct isn't to question, it's to rationalize. Because authority isn't supposed to be wrong. And if it is, the believer would rather blame themselves than the system. That's the power of sacred hierarchy. It rewires morality. It teaches that obedience equals goodness and doubt equals sin. It's a brilliant form of control, one that doesn't need force, only reverence. Religious institutions have turned that reverence into currency. It buys silence, loyalty, and forgiveness, even for the unforgivable. People defend corrupt leaders not because they're blind, but because they're afraid to see. Because the moment you realize you're a messenger of God is just another flawed human being, the entire structure trembles. And it's easier to protect the illusion than rebuild your world without it. That's not faith. That's conditioning dressed as devotion, the identity shield. Ask someone why they believe, and the answer often starts with, because I'm a, not because it's true. That's the trick. Religion doesn't just shape what people believe. It shapes who they think they are. It fuses belief with identity until they become inseparable. You're not a person who believes. You're a believer. And once that happens, evidence stops being information. It becomes attack. When you challenge a doctrine, they don't hear, this idea might be wrong. They hear, you're wrong. And the human ego is built to defend itself. It doesn't care about truth. It cares about survival. This is why conversations about faith collapse so fast. Logic feels like insult. Facts feel like betrayal. And the person arguing isn't protecting God. They're protecting their sense of self. Identity is powerful. It gives life structure, purpose, community, but it's also dangerous, because when your self-worth depends on being right, humility becomes impossible. You can't afford to change your mind when your entire reputation, family, and self-image depend on not changing it. It's not about theology anymore. It's about ego preservation. That's why people defend obvious contradictions, justify cruelty, or twist morality to fit the narrative. They have to. Because losing the argument would mean losing themselves. The fusion of faith and ego creates a perfect psychological shield. Nothing gets through. Every challenge becomes persecution, every fact becomes a test, and every doubt becomes the enemy within. They call it faith, but what it really is self-defense disguised as holiness. The cognitive dissonance game. When reality contradicts belief, the brain scrambles to protect the illusion. Psychologists call it cognitive dissonance. Believers call it a test of faith. But either way, it's the same reflex, pain avoidance. The human mind can handle almost anything, except internal conflict. When facts collide with what you were taught to believe, it creates psychological tension, and the brain doesn't want to solve it. It wants to escape it. So it bends reality instead. It twists, edits, and rationalizes until the story feels safe again. A prophecy fails? It was symbolic. A leader is exposed? The devil's attacking our church. A prayer goes unanswered? God said no for a reason. Every contradiction gets rebranded as divine mystery. Every failure becomes proof of faith. That's not enlightenment, that's mental gymnastics. And yet, it works. Because the mind isn't built for truth. It's built for comfort. The more painful the contradiction, the harder the brain fights to protect the belief that caused it. That's why even when religion harms people, emotionally, financially, even physically, many still call it love. They need it to be love. Because if it isn't, then the years they spent worshiping, obeying, and sacrificing weren't devotion, they were delusion. And that realization is unbearable. So instead, they double down. They tell themselves the suffering has meaning. That doubt is weakness. That endurance is proof of faith. But what they're really doing is playing defense against reality. Cognitive dissonance is the brain's way of keeping the story alive, even when the truth is already breaking through. The fragile God complex. Deep down, some defenders of faith aren't protecting God. They're protecting the idea that the universe cares about them, that they matter in some cosmic story, that their suffering has purpose, and their life has meaning beyond accident. It's not divine love they're fighting for, it's significance. Because the moment you remove the idea of a watching, caring deity, the spotlight goes out. And for many people, that silence feels unbearable. Humans crave meaning the way lungs crave air. We want to believe our joys and struggles are part of a bigger plan, that someone sees us, that we're not just tiny flashes of awareness in an indifferent void. Religion offers that reassurance. It says, "You're chosen, you're loved, you're known." That promise is intoxicating. It fills the emptiness science can describe, but never soothe. So when reality threatens that illusion, people panic. They'll rewrite facts, defend absurdities, and reject entire disciplines of knowledge, not to protect their God, but to protect their place in his story. Because if the universe doesn't revolve around you, then you're just another organism on a spinning rock. And that's a hard truth to swallow. So they build fortresses of faith, rituals, rules, prayers, anything to keep that feeling of cosmic importance alive. They call it devotion, but it's really a shield against insignificance. And that's why belief is so emotionally charged. Because behind every holy certainty is a quiet, terrified whisper, "Please, let me matter." That's not blasphemy. That's human nature, fragile, beautiful, and desperate to be seen in a universe that doesn't play favorites. Breaking the spell. Once the illusion cracks, even slightly, it never fully heals. Something shifts. The old certainty doesn't fit anymore. You start noticing the contradictions you used to explain away. You hear sermons that once comforted you and realize they sound different now, thinner, almost hollow. People who escape blind faith describe it the same way, like waking up, not from sleep, but from a dream that once felt real, a dream you didn't even know you were having. But waking up isn't easy, because once you see the machinery, the fear, the guilt, the conditioning, you can't unsee it. And you start to wonder how much of your faith was love and how much was fear. For those still inside, defending faith at any cost feels noble. It feels holy. They truly believe they're protecting something sacred. They don't realize it's the fear itself that's sacred to them, the comfort of control, the safety of answers, the illusion of being chosen. That's the cruel genius of belief. It convinces you that the cage is the kingdom, that surrender is freedom, that obedience is virtue. But when the spell breaks, even for a moment, you glimpse something terrifying and beautiful. A world that doesn't need divine permission to be meaningful. A life that's smaller than eternity, but more real than any promise of heaven. And once you taste that freedom, you never go back. Because faith built on fear feels like devotion, until you finally feel what it's like to breathe without it. The truth is, nobody chooses what to believe at first. Belief chooses you. You inherit it, from parents, from culture, from fear. You grow up breathing it in until it feels like air. And when someone questions it, it feels like they're trying to drown you. But once you see the pattern, the fear, the guilt, the tribal loyalty, you realize faith isn't a mystery. It's psychology wrapped in holiness. And the moment you recognize that, it loses its power. You start noticing how the arguments don't change, only the gods do. How the stories repeat, with new names, new prophets, same control. And you understand that what people defend at any cost isn't the divine. It's the comfort of not having to think alone. But thinking alone isn't loneliness. It's freedom. It's the first breath outside the cage. Because when you stop worshiping fear, the world opens up. Not heaven, not hell. Just life. Raw, temporary, extraordinary. And that's enough. If this video made something inside you shift, even slightly, you're not alone. There are millions quietly waking up from the same dream. And if you want to see the world clearly, without superstition or fear, subscribe, stay curious, and keep questioning. Because that's how every illusion ends. Not with violence, not with anger, but with one person finally saying, "I just want to know what's real."